What occurs when two everyday sisters, enjoying a serene evening, come up against a gang unaware of their true capabilities? The ensuing chaos will dismantle expectations and reveal more than anyone anticipated. You won't believe how this fight for justice unfolds. Inside the small Chicago diner, the air was warm and filled with the scent of fresh coffee and frying bacon. Kayla and Tamara Johnson had picked this location for its quaint charm, a place to relax after weeks of rigorous military training. To anyone observing, they appeared as two ordinary women relishing a calm evening. Kayla, dressed in a leather jacket and radiating a composed demeanor, exuded a sense of quiet confidence, while Tamara, in her clean white hoodie, wore a friendly, approachable smile that softened her otherwise serious presence. As they enjoyed their steaming mugs, their conversation flowed naturally, sharing tales from their missions and joking lightheartedly about who had better aim. However, their peaceful bubble was burst when the door suddenly swung open, the sharp sound slicing through the diner like a slap and drawing everyone's attention toward the group of men stomping in. 5 of them were loud and obnoxious, their laughter reverberating off the walls, but there was nothing joyful about it. The leader, a man with a shaved head and a Confederate flag tattoo sprawled across his forearm, surveyed the room with a smirk that sent chills down spines. When his gaze fell on the sisters, the smirk became predatory. "Hey, look at this," he called out, loud enough for even the cooks in the back to hear. "Double trouble, huh?" The atmosphere in the diner shifted in an instant. Conversations ceased, forks clattered against plates, and suddenly everyone seemed intently focused on their meals. The young waitress, with a name tag reading Julie, froze behind the counter, her hand poised over the coffee pot. The only 2 people who remained unfazed were Kayla and Tamara, exchanging a glance, one of those silent sibling looks that conveyed everything. Kayla's eyes narrowed slightly, a quiet reminder to maintain composure, while Tamara raised an eyebrow, a mute inquiry. "Are we really doing this today?" The group's leader wasn't finished. One of his friends, a wiry guy with a scruffy beard, leaned closer to their table, his weight propped against its edge. "What are 2 girls like you doing here?" His tone was slick, laced with false charm. "Shouldn't you be somewhere else?" Kayla carefully set her mug down, her movements deliberate and unhurried as she met his gaze directly. Her voice was steady yet calm. "We're just here for coffee. Move along." The man remained unmoved, while behind him, his friends chuckled with low, malicious laughter. The leader sauntered up, pulling out a chair, spinning it around before dropping into it. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, a wide grin plastered on his face but lacking warmth. "You think you can just tell me what to do?" His voice was sharp, dripping with mockery. "You've got a smart mouth for someone out of place." Tamara's grip tightened around her coffee cup, her knuckles turning white as the waitress shifted nervously behind the counter, her eyes darting between the group and the sisters. Tension hung thick in the air, crackling with unspoken threats. Kayla reached out, placing her hand on Tamara's wrist, a silent reminder to keep cool. She faced the leader again, her tone steady. "We don't want trouble. Let's not make this worse than necessary." For a moment, it seemed her calm might diffuse the situation, but the leader leaned back, laughter escaping him. It was a cold, hollow sound that made the other patrons shrink lower in their seats. "Oh, you think you're in charge here?" he scoffed, glancing at his crew. "Boys, I think we need to teach these 2 who runs this place." The men began to close in, their voices rising and their taunts sharpening. The room felt as if it was shrinking as their presence became increasingly oppressive. Yet the sisters did not falter. If anything, their composure seemed to enrage the men even further. One of the men reached toward Kayla, his hand hovering near her shoulder, a sneer twisting his face. That was the instant everything changed. Kayla's eyes flicked to his hand for just a brief moment, and in that split second, the storm they hoped to avert crashed down upon them. As soon as the man's hand made contact with Kayla's shoulder, it was over for him. Without hesitation, her body moved as if it had rehearsed this moment countless times. In one fluid motion, she seized his wrist, wrenched it behind his back, and shoved him forward. The sound of his knees colliding with the table echoed through the diner, followed by a sharp yelp of pain. For a brief moment, the diner fell into a stunned silence. Even the hum of the refrigerator in the corner seemed to stop. Then pandemonium broke out. The leader of the gang, his ego now shattered, lunged at Tamara with a roar that carried more bark than bite. Tamara didn't flinch. She smoothly sidestepped his attack and, with a calculated kick to his ankle, sent him sprawling to the floor. His head crashed against the linoleum with a loud thud, letting out a groan as his arrogance was replaced by confusion. "What the... Who are you two?" he stammered, his voice trembling as he scrambled to regain his feet. clearly realizing he was in over his head. Kayla didn't respond. She was already engaged with two of his crew who had decided that sheer numbers might grant them the advantage. Spoiler alert. They were mistaken. The first man swung wildly, his fist slicing through the air, but Kayla leaned back just enough to evade him. Before he could recover, she stepped in sharply, elbowing him in the ribs and sending him staggering into a booth. The second man attempted his luck with a chair, hoisting it high above his head, but Kayla ducked beneath it and countered with a precise jab to his gut. He collapsed like a deck of cards. Meanwhile, Tamara faced her own challengers. One of the men, emboldened by the chaos, drew a knife, the blade reflecting the flickering light above. Big mistake. Tamara's eyes narrowed as she advanced, closing the gap faster than he could react. She seized his wrist, twisting it with just enough force to make him drop the weapon, then shoved him back. The knife skidded across the floor, finally coming to rest beneath the counter where the waitress had taken cover, her phone grasped in trembling hands. The leader was now visibly panicking. He attempted to rally what remained of his crew. "Don't let them win," he shouted, but his voice wavered. The confidence that once flowed from his every word was now replaced by desperation. He snatched a glass bottle from a nearby table and hurled it at Tamara, aiming for an easy hit. Tamara caught it in midair, as easily as if she were snatching at a fly, and gently placed it down on the table, almost mockingly, her gaze locking onto his with a simmering intensity. "You're outmatched," she said, her voice low and steady. "Walk away while you still can." The words landed on him with more force than any physical blow. His crew, now battered and bruised, began to retreat, dragging their injured comrades with them. The leader hesitated for a heartbeat, glancing back and forth between Kayla and Tamara, as if weighing his chances. Spoiler alert, they were none. Just as they reached the door, the wail of sirens filled the air, growing louder by the second. A pair of squad cars screeched to a halt outside, and in moments, officers burst in, guns drawn and voices commanding. "Hands up! Nobody move!" Kayla and Tamara exchanged glances. Naturally, it had escalated to this point. They raised their hands slowly, their expressions calm and unreadable as they sought to explain the situation to the officers. But it didn't matter. Despite the testimonies of the few brave witnesses who spoke up and the waitress still trembling behind the counter, the sisters found themselves cuffed and escorted outside, while the gang received noticeably lenient treatment. A few were pulled aside for questioning, but none were handcuffed. The leader, now sporting a smirk, strode past the sisters as he was shoved into the back of a squad car. Leaning in close enough for only Tamara to hear, he whispered, "You haven't seen the last of us," his voice laced with venom. Tamara clenched her jaw but held her tongue. Kayla gave her sister a subtle shake of the head. This wasn't the moment. Yet as they were loaded into the back of another vehicle, the look in Tamara's eyes said it all. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The police station was agonizingly cold as officers interrogated Kayla and Tamara as if they were the criminals. Their military backgrounds became the focal point of every inquiry, framed as a weapon rather than an accomplishment. "So, special forces, huh?" one officer sneered, flipping through a file. "That explains your approach," Kaya replied calmly but sharply. "My approach? You mean defending myself when attacked? Isn't that your job?" Across the hallway, Tamara faced the same patronizing tone. "Your training makes you dangerous in situations like this," her interrogator suggested. She let out a humorless chuckle. "Dangerous? The only danger that night was 5 grown men harassing us. Funny how you're not asking them about their actions." Meanwhile, Ray Dixon, the gang leader, leveraged his connections to spread a distorted version of events, edited footage depicting Kayla and Tamara as aggressors, igniting headlines that ignored the gang's provocations. But the sisters were not about to remain silent. Tamara contacted their commanding officer, who activated powerful allies. Within hours, unedited footage, eyewitness accounts, and security recordings emerged, unveiling the gang's assault in its full, ugly reality. Social media exploded as "Justice for the Johnson sisters" went viral, and public outcry compelled local news to retract their statements. The sisters didn't stop there. At a press conference, they methodically dismantled the lies. "We defended ourselves because no one else would," Kayla stated, her voice unwavering. "And now we're being vilified for refusing to remain silent," Tamara added. "This isn't just about us, it's about every black woman who has had to fight to be heard." The shift was monumental. Under immense pressure, the police department apologized and dropped all charges. Days later, federal agents arrested Dixon and his crew on charges of assault, hate crimes, and conspiracy. The footage of Dixon in handcuffs, his smug expression replaced with fear, was broadcast nationwide. As the sisters sat on their porch watching the sunset, the battle behind them was fresh yet far from forgotten. "You think they'll stay afraid?" Kayla asked, a small smile forming on her lips. Tamara's gaze remained steady. "No, but we're ready for whatever comes next."